not on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, these weather patterns can change that. If it's if it's occurring somewhere else in the country, in those more southerly areas, that of course their growing schedule is ahead of ours,
Mm-hmm.
and to the west, and then the storm fronts come through. That's one of the big ways that a lot of these things get moved around, both insects and diseases. But to date, we're okay on late blight, and it's early yet.
Mm-hmm.
We have plenty of time for that to heat up if it's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I know one of your favorite topics is pollinators, and because I know it, I see the light in your eyes anytime we mention pollinators. But it's interesting to me. It just seems, and it's probably just something I'm noticing more now than ever, and it's probably not much greater than ever. But it just seems like there are butterflies everywhere this year. What are you hearing about butterflies? Probably nothing, huh?
Probably nothing.
Yeah,
Is
okay.
right.
So they just came to my house this year?
Maybe.
Okay.
But they're around, yeah. And
are they
I've
important as a pollinator?
I've noticed a number of moths and as well around, and part of that can be depending on their life cycle, how they overwintered, whether it was in a egg stage. This spring was pretty reasonable, that a lot of things could have been able to survive the winter and hatch out this spring, and so here they are.
We think of bees as our number one pollinator. In terms of their abilities and their benefits, are bees more effective as a pollinator than, say, a butterfly or a bird even?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, usually the bees are more effective. A lot of times, I guess we don't often think of butterflies normally as a pollinator, because they do have to, and most insects have become specialized in that ability to pollinate and to move that, transfer the pollen.
They have such a
on
light
those
touch.
Flowers. Yes. Yeah, and some things can be bigger, and some things are nectar feeders versus going in there to get the pollen. So it's those insects that really go into the flower, and all flowers are different too, their shape, their construction.
Yeah.
And so different insects, bigger insects are better on bigger flowers, and then other ones, smaller ones, can be much more effective on more dainty flowers, where the flower's small to begin with. There may not be a lot of pollen on there. Of course, it's enough to get the job done, and then the plant itself.
Yeah.
We have some pretty delicate plants that if you have a big butterfly landing on that, it'll bend the whole branch over. And then we have other very tiny insects that can hone right in there and not move the plant at all.
There's a butterfly that is so heavy it'll bend the plant.
Well, especially on flowers.
Okay.
Flowers with, annual flowers with, very small stems that don't have a lot of
like impatiens,
woody material in them. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Can't you imagine that?
Here's another.
And the big bumblebees, the big bomber bees.
Those things, yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed a couple of other things, and this is beyond the snake question and the spider and snake question that we had, but we do have an actual caller who has probably something much more interesting than what I was going to ask. Good morning.
Hi. I have a question for Bob.
Okay.
I have an African violet, and it seems like it blooms real heavily, and then it doesn't bloom for a long time. Am I doing something wrong?
It might. Well, sometimes when plants do that, they bloom heavy, then it takes a lot of energy to do that. And then they've got to kind of recycle back and build up enough energy again to make the flower buds and to continue to flower. So look at how long's it been in the container that it's in?
Probably about a year.
Okay. Well, that's not that long, because sometimes plants will become pot bound, so they'll outgrow their pot. We leave them in there, so you can actually check that just by removing the plant from the pot, easily, of course. And if that root system is really wrapping itself around the perimeter of the pot and just a mass of roots, then that's a good signal that it's time to just step that pot size up one size. We can overdo that. We can say, oh, this plant's really growing, I'll just plant it in a big pot. And then a lot of times plants will decline because it's just too big of a growing area. And it's easier to overwater or underwater things when the pot size gets too big. So just check that. And while the plant's out, you can also check the root system to see the color of the roots. Are they a more creamy white color? Are the roots alive, or there's some roots dying in there? And then, now, how often do you water, and how often do you have fertilizer in the water?
I have those fertilizer spikes in the plant. I put 3 of them in. It's a 4-inch pot. And then I water it from the bottom about once a week.
Okay.
That's a pretty good plan.
Yeah.
I like your plan.
So and then light-wise, light will definitely affect that whole process. So just make sure that the plant's getting enough light. But the foliage, what does the color of the leaves look like?
They're green, but they're like curling, like rounded, like curling under a little bit.
Okay. And is there anything on the undersides of the leaves? Like
no.
aphids, or sometimes that leaf curling can be the result of aphids on there, sometimes even mites. Mites are smaller. The aphids.
Oh, maybe I'll have to look more closer.
Yeah, look a little closer. And those leaves can be a little hard to see things too, because of they're fuzzy.
Yeah.
So just look at that closely.
Okay.
Sometimes now with mites, sometimes you need magnification. If mites get bad enough, then they'll make a little bit of webbing that you'll see the webbing, very fine webbing.
Okay.
And then aphids, though, they oftentimes will be green in color. They will pretty much match the color of the underside of the leaf. So you have to look closely, but you can see those easily without any magnification.
All right, couple of
just
things
check
to
that
check.
to see if that cupping is involved there.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I want to go back to something that you said to her, and that was when you're checking that, you're taking the plant out and you're thinking about, I'm going to transfer it to another pot, and you see that the roots have wrapped themselves around in a circle there, so the pot's too small. When you do that transplant, are you breaking up that soil to free up those roots, or are you just putting them in a new batch of soil and hoping they find their way?
It's good to tease those out, try to unwrap them a little bit.
Okay.
And oftentimes
Don't be too hard on them, though.
Well, you can actually cut them.
Really?
Yeah. And where they're cut, they'll branch out and make new roots.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't do that, those roots will just keep growing in a circle.
Okay.
And I don't exactly know why that is, but they do that. And even if you put them in a bigger pot, you'd think, oh, well, they'll find their way out into that new soil. And oftentimes they don't. They just keep growing in that circle. And then eventually they can cut each other off, girdle each other, in essence.
Yeah. Strangle each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So just
tease them out like with a comb.
Yeah. And you can flatten them out. And oftentimes on the bottom, it just becomes a thick
big
mass of roots there. And those actually you can just kind of break that out, bend them out. And if you damage them a little bit, it's usually going to be okay.
Okay.
It's better to do that than to not to do that. Yeah.
Okay. Just note he said usually.
And we learned when pot culture became much more common, with ornamental plants, trees and shrubs, that same thing occurs with them. And so before you plant those, you can't just pop them out of the pot and stick them in the ground. You have to sever those roots at least in 2 places on that root ball and get those cut open, get those circling roots out, and then plant the plant, because otherwise, eventually, you'll wonder why the plant's declining.
Yeah, and of course we know all about pot culture around these parts. Just saying. All right, thank you, Mr. Sir. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160. Fox News up next, top of the hour, and then Mr. Josh Widdison in our WCCS newsroom. And good morning to you. It is a Friday, July the 2nd today.